AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Welcome, guys. Welcome to another edition of the Curt Schilling Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to get right to it. I'm going to laugh, and you're going to hear me laugh during the soundbite, okay? I'm just telling you beforehand. President Trump was in Montana speaking at a rally last night, and he was on fire. I mean, for his on fire, I think he could be a better public speaker. I don't think he's very good, but he can be funny. And last night he was funny. I want you to listen up to some of the parts of last night, his rally in Montana, which was another overwhelming success.
And I said, you know, Angela, I can't guarantee it, but we're protecting you, and it means a lot more to you than protecting us, because I don't know how much protection we get by protecting you. And then they go out and they make a gas deal, oil and gas from Russia, where they pay billions and billions of dollars to Russia. Okay? So they want to protect against Russia, yet they pay billions of dollars to Russia, and we're the schmucks that are paying for the whole thing. And then, of course, we have North Korea. So since the rhetoric stopped, you know, we had very tough rhetoric. Would you say that was a little tough, right? So remember, they said, he's too tough. He's going to cause a war. It's too tough. Now they say, he's too nice. He's too nice. He's too nice. I got along very well with Chairman Kim. I got along very well. That's a good thing. They're going, will President Trump be prepared? You know, President Putin is KGB and this and that. You know what? Putin's fine. He's fine. We're all fine. We're people. Will I be prepared? Totally prepared. I've been preparing for this stuff my whole life. They don't say that. They don't say that. No, when you see the Times, how dishonest they are, when you see the Washington Post, how totally dishonest. When we leave, and I actually say this, they are all doing numbers that they've never done. When I announce they are going to endorse me, because if I lose, should I lose, or if I don't run, they're out of business. Who's going to cover? They're going to cover Bernie? Hey, they're going to cover Sleepy Joe Biden? They're going to cover Pocahontas, who was... Let's say I'm debating Pocahontas, right? I promise you I'll do this. I will take, you know those little kits they sell on television for $2? Learn your heritage. We will take that little kit and say, but we have to do it gently. Because we're in the Me Too generation, so we have to be very gentle. And we will very gently take that kit and we will slowly toss it, hoping it doesn't hit her and injure her arm, even though it only weighs probably 2 ounces. And we will say, I will give you $1 million to your favorite charity, paid for by Trump, if you take the test and it shows you're an Indian.
He's on a roll. The public rallies have been the thing to make you understand that the news media is lying its ass off, most of it. His support, his base is growing. I would argue an election today he would win by far more than he won last time, and I don't think there's any way to refute that. He is garnering more Hispanic vote. He is garnering more of the black vote. The walkaway movement is making things change, and God bless the people that are and it's almost one of those things where I have trouble not saying, you know, what took you so long when you see what's happening. One more thing I want to talk about real quick, intellectual dishonesty, media dishonesty Well, it makes me sick to my stomach. On MSNBC the other day, they were talking about the Supreme Court nominee. First things first, the left is saying you shouldn't do it during an election year. We never have. But the left is lying. The fact of the matter is when the initial appointment was supposed to be made, Merrick Garland, by Obama, it was a presidential election year. A presidential election year. The argument was you shouldn't be able to make a nomination during a presidential election year, which, by the way, I think is crap. You should be able to make a nomination whenever you want. That was the rights argument. Conservatives said this. And I think lefts, they pushed back, but I think they all recognize the validity to that. Now the left is saying that, but they're using the midterms as the election year. This was not about midterm elections, because in that sense, there's almost elections every single year. You'd never get to pick a judge if you had to wait for a non-election year. But the fact of the matter is, not only do they believe he should wait until after the midterms, which, by the way, they're going to lose, but they also believe that President Trump should not be allowed to make a Supreme Court pick while he's under, I'm using air quotes in the most ardent possible way, around while he's under investigation, the scam that is the Mueller investigation. Listen to this logic.
We are in a very unique situation here, though. We have a president who is facing not only an unprecedented number of civil and criminal liability questions, unprecedented, but also a very credible threat of impeachment.
I have dozens of tweets from people who, lay people like myself, who are saying this president should not, being under investigation, even be in a position to nominate a judge at all. There are some people, legal and ethical scholars, who have chimed in on that and said, maybe that's true.
Look, I agree with that. My first choice, if I were sort of putting these in order of how we should analyze this, is he should not get to nominate someone until this investigation is done. That's the Cory Booker view, as far as I can tell. I think that even under the McConnell rule, he called Obama a, quote, lame duck president, and that's why he didn't get to nominate someone in his view. Well, I think someone who, again, is facing a credible possibility of impeachment, is under serious criminal investigation, is not, it could be also considered a lame duck president.
Seriously, I mean, the left would try and pass itself off as moral cops, ethical cops, or they would have you believe, and this is how they do this, they would have you believe he's under an unprecedented number of civil and federal issues, which is a lie, first off. And half of what they're doing, well, almost all of what they're doing, if not all of what they're doing, is self-made, self-created, and fake. I mean, the Mueller investigation, we've learned, has been a complete sham since the beginning. And I would argue that they're waiting for something monumental for Mueller to come out and do his best James Comey. But that's who they are. That's the thing that they believe. I mean, those sound bites are priceless because they're going to live forever. But the fact of the matter is it has nothing to do with his investigation or investigations, the fake ones, or the fact that it's an election year. The fact of the matter is that there's nothing they can do. Nothing the left can do to stop President Donald Trump from appointing the next Supreme Court justice. Nothing. They have no power, no authority, nothing. And we're going to see a truly conservative Supreme Court, a constitutional, law-abiding Supreme Court, which should make everybody happy. Hey, we're going to take a short break. On the flip side, Mark Smith, New York Times bestselling author and constitutional attorney, his new book just launched, #Duped, How the Anti-Gun Lobby Exploits the Parkland School Shooting and How Gun Owners Can Fight Back.
Hey folks, I want to tell you about Breitbart News' Second Amendment newsletter, Downrange with A.W.R. Hawkins. Features the top gun stories of the week, every week, and guest columnists like Gun Owners of America's Larry Pratt or Armed American Radio's Mark Walters. Also features a review of a firearm or firearm accessory each week. The newsletter downloads on Thursday, comes right to your email inbox. You can subscribe at Breitbart.com/AWR.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm joined now by author Mark Smith. He is a New York Times bestselling author and constitutional attorney. He's launching his new book, #Duped, How the Anti-Gun Lobby Exploits the Parkland School Shooting and How Gun Owners Can Fight Back. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Kurt, how are you doing this morning? 4th of July week.
Yep.
We have a Supreme Court pick by Donald Trump, and the only two things in America going down are Bryce Harper's batting average and the Democratic Party.
I look at July 9th this year as being a second 4th of July, when President Trump announces his Supreme Court pick, because we will have a true conservative, constitutional, law-abiding Supreme Court for the first time in our lifetimes. But when you go back to the election, and for me, much of what was happening during the election revolved around my Second Amendment rights. And I recognized, we were talking about national reciprocity being passed, and we were all excited about the other stuff. We'll talk about that. That hasn't happened, and a lot of other things since then involving Parkland, which your book is about, we're going to talk about. But the fact of the matter was, to me, the SCOTUS pick was Neil Gorsuch was the reason you voted for Trump, for no other reason. We've already seen the benefits of that. Now we're getting ready to see. We may even see another Supreme Court justice in addition to this one, and I wonder what the left's going to do after this pick anyway.
Well, I think you're right, that the whole reason why sometimes we Republicans, as much as we hate to do it, you have to sometimes hold your nose and vote for a Kelly Ayotte in a place like New Hampshire, because the alternative is to have the Democrats control the Senate, for example, and you won't get a conservative in there. You'll have to moderate, and you'll have to take some squish, and like a David Souter, and you'll get squishy results. But since you do have enough Republicans in the Senate to confirm Donald Trump's Supreme Court pick, we are finally, hopefully, going to have a constitutional court for the first time in literally 50 or 60 plus years, if not even longer, if you think about it. But basically, the U.S. Supreme Court went off the rails, in the 50s and the 60s, and basically became social justice warriors. They essentially decided that they were going to decide issues like abortion for Americans and not allow Americans to decide issues like abortion for Americans. And I think that hurt the Supreme Court's credibility and reputation quite substantially with Americans. Now, of course, if you're on the winning side and the Supreme Court rules for your team, well, you're happy about that. But, I think today many people in America view the Supreme Court as just another political body, no different than the president or Congress or a state legislature. And that's not what the Supreme Court was supposed to be about.
Right.
But that's what it's become over the last many decades. And hopefully with the appointment of someone that follows the law and not make it up, the Supreme Court as an institution may gain some further respectability that it hasn't had for some time because of its political nature.
The word constitutionalist became somehow disgraceful. Neil Gorsuch was a constitutionalist, and a constitutionalist essentially is someone who rules by the laws of the Constitution, doesn't try and reinterpret, doesn't try and create different meaning, because the document, listen, I'm not, the founders were brilliant people. The document is very, very easy to follow. The laws and the amendments are very, very easy to understand. It's only when we get in the middle of things do we mess things up. And the fact of the matter is, this is it feels like a two-argument fight for the left. They want abortion on demand, and they want to be able to get stoned when and where and how they choose, which speaks volumes for their platforms. But the fact of the matter is, the first thing you heard was abortion rights, abortion rights, abortion rights, and that's all this is about to them. And my argument is the power is in the people and should be with the people. You're not going to lose your right to get an abortion. Some states are going to if this happens, some states are going to outlaw it. But the fact of the matter is, you'll be able to, as you should be, go to a different state and exercise different rules. And that's how we were founded. That's what we were founded, and the reason we were founded with states having individual rights, and our federal government has become too big.
One of the words that doesn't get talked about enough is the word federalism. And what federalism means is that we have a federal constitution that ultimately was supposed to protect the borders and protect us from invasions and things like that. And then you had states, and every state was supposed to be its standalone, independent political body that could make its own choices about its own citizens. And they weren't supposed to be uniform. So New Hampshire could have no taxes. New York State could have lots of taxes. Vermont might have abortion on demand. Texas might not have no abortion. And you had this sort of quilt of different policies and really an experimentation. So if it turned out that New Hampshire became a great state with no taxes and New York became a horrible state with lots of taxes, people could look and say, hey, maybe we should be more like New Hampshire than New York. But what's happened over the last, many decades is that everything has become controlled by the federal government in Washington, D.C. So now we have federal government regulations that govern, among other things, the amount of water you can have in your residential toilet, literally. That you now have to have Braille you have to have Braille on ATM keypads in a drive-through window, right? You now have to have stuff like this, not because of the state laws, but because the Fed told you this is what we want. And hopefully with this new court, we get back to where every state can have its own rules and laws and is not entirely governed by the kleptocrats of Washington, D.C.
The problem is going to be that 50 million Democrats are going to have to move to California, New York, or Massachusetts. That's the problem, because those are those three places would. Were there no electoral college, they would be the ones picking our president. It's a great example. You mentioned the federal government and its hold. So one of the places we're seeing the devastating effects of a government that's overreached is our education system. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have 50 different states with 50 different approaches to education so we could produce the best of breed? And education is different. There's a different education system needed for people that grow up in California and people that grow up in Iowa. That's just fact. And it's amazing to me. Well, we've watched our kids slip time and time again. Hey, I want to get to the Second Amendment because one of the things that I was talking about around this, and again, folks, the book is called #Duped, How the Anti-Gun Lobby Exploits the Parkland School Shooting and How Gun Owners Can Fight Back. And it's an incredibly relevant piece, especially given what we're getting ready to see from a Supreme Court perspective. During the election, right around the election, national reciprocity was on the table. And I remember thinking that we were going to have a vote not long after the president got into office. We were going to have a case in front of the Supreme Court that was going to put national reciprocity not just on the table, but pass it. We've gone backwards. We've gone backwards because of Parkland. And I'm wondering if you can explain to people how, even though we as conservatives have the majority, how did liberals get a hold of this and actually push back and cause more government intervention in our Second Amendment rather than less?
It's actually one of the reasons why I write the book, #Dupe, because I thought that the lessons of the Parkland High School shooting are government incompetence and that you are your own first responder and you better protect your life and the lives of your friends and families because the police, no matter how well-intentioned or otherwise, will not protect you. The lesson of Parkland was you had this guy, Nicholas Cruz, that FBI knew he was a potential school shooter. The school board knew he was a potential. Everyone knew this guy was the next school shooter. The police had been to his house like 20 times, and yet nothing happened. Nothing happened. And then he goes to school, and he starts shooting at the place. The armed guard, Scott Peterson, who's a deputy of Broward County, he's now retired. He does not intervene. He stays outside the school. The two unarmed security guards at Parkland, when the shooting started, Curt, one jumped in a golf cart and drove away. The other hid in a closet.
Yeah.
And then when the Broward Sheriff's Department, the police department arrives, the scene is controlled largely by Captain Jan Jordan, who instructs paramedics and fire department officials to stay outside the school despite being asked 6 times to go in. She demands that they stay outside the school and not treat the victims because it was too dangerous. So the lesson of Parkland is not that we need yet another gun law, of which there's already 20,000 in the United States. The lesson of Parkland is that if you don't protect yourself with your own guns, then forget about being protected by the government or the police, because it ain't going to happen. Right. And what bothered me was that the media was, and the left was ready, because, as Rahm Emanuel explained, and I wrote this in the book, he says, never let a good crisis go to waste. So when this shooting occurred, and Broward County, by the way, politically, is essentially New York City in terms of it's all Democrats, it's all liberals. So as soon as there was a shooting in Broward County, you knew that the political outcry in that county was going to be like the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It was going to be all lefty, all gun control, all we love Hillary, all we hate Trump immediately. You knew that was going to be the case because that's what that county is all about, by and large. And the left took full advantage of it, and they created a false narrative that there's a gun control movement in the United States, which is not the case. This is all astroturf. This is a handful of kids with a lot of money from a few rich elites talking about gun control and creating this fake impression that people actually wanted more gun control, but they don't. But our politicians often are scared of their own shadow, and they sometimes buckle, and that's really what happened. But now the time has passed. yet again, cooler heads have prevailed. And guess what people have realized? Oh, yeah, actually, guns do save lives. That's why all the people, when they marched in D.C. in March against guns, were surrounded by, guess what? Lots and lots of people with guns. Right? And people realize that, wait a minute, yeah, the lesson of Parkland is that government incompetence, because it's slowly but surely come out that everyone knew about Nicholas Cruz and did nothing about it. And if the cops aren't going to protect you, guess what? Then you better protect yourself.
Well,
but that's why we're not getting concealed carry, Kurt, because guess what? The guys in Congress got scared. They're like, oh, well, the House passed concealed carry. It was the Senate that was holding it all up. And as you know, this is one of the debates in the Senate. Mitch McConnell, and probably rightly so, does not want to waive the filibuster rule for normal legislation. So in the Senate, arguably, you need 60 votes to overcome a Democratic filibuster. And, of course, we only have 51 Republicans in the Senate, and not getting into the issue of John McCain's health. So at most we have 51 votes in the Senate, and obviously that's less than 60 votes you need to break a Democratic filibuster of concealed carry or removing suppressors out of the National Firearms Act, which also is hung up with that so-called filibuster.
Right. The narrative that the left has managed to paint to I don't know any other word other than ignorant. The ignorant sheep who choose to not be informed. The narrative for me is simple. Guns have been turned into an animated, force of nature by the left, when in fact guns are exactly what they're supposed to be, which is a deterrent. The NRA has been painted as a terrorist organization when it is made up of 6+ million of the most law-abiding citizens in this country. The members of the NRA commit fewer crimes than police officers by a percentage every year. I mean, it's just fact. I mean, the stats are embarrassing. And Sonny Johnson, who's on quite a bit, often tells me one of the reasons we're having issues is because we continue to be reactive to their policies and to their public outcry instead of being active and on the offensive. But the fact of the matter is, it's very hard to be anything but reactive when you don't have the narrative, you don't have the pen. The media is run by the left and controlled by the left. Mark, we're hearing police officers say, listen, I would rather you have a gun in your hand than 911 on the phone.
Yeah, you're right.
This country is 300+ million people. When we talk about school shootings like a Parkland, 30 seconds, 60 seconds could be 10 to 20 kids' lives.
Well, you saw that in Maryland, right? The police arrived 60 seconds after the guy started to shoot up the Capitol Gazette there in Annapolis, which, by the way, they knew this guy was crazy. This guy was tweeting threatening thoughts to the guy. The shooter had sued the paper in a very nasty lawsuit. The newspaper had talked to the police about him, and the police said, well, if you see him, call 911. Well, the police showed up 1 minute after the shooting started, and he was still able to kill 5 people. So, the old saying is, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. And I think that proves the point that even when the police are perfect in their response, it's still not good enough, and it's still not better than you protecting yourself because, as I write about in the book Duped, you are your own first responder. It's false, and I'm a big supporter of police, but it's simply wrong to call police first responders. They are not first responders. They are second responders. You are the first responder, Kurt. You're the one that sees the criminal. You're the one that calls 911. You're the one that has to deal with it. The police come after you contact the police, and they're the second responders. So my point is, if police have certain weapons and guns to protect themselves from the criminal, you should have it as well because you need it more than they do because you deal with it first, they deal with it second. And by the way, Kurt, I'm going to make a little defense for liberals. This is the only time you ever hear me say this. I have a slight defense for anti-gun liberals in big cities that write for these papers like the New York Times. And I'm going to let you know how. So in New York City, you cannot touch a firearm unless you have a gun license. If you touch a firearm without a gun license in New York City, you have committed a felony, and you go to jail automatically for 1 year, like Plexico Burris. Now, here's the problem. So if I want to take a journalist from the New York Times or ABC News or CBS and say, look, guns are not what you want. Let me show what a gun is. Let's have you go shoot a handgun. Let's have you learn about guns. Let me bring you to a gun range. Let me do these things that ordinary people do in America. It is impossible for me or anybody else to educate Northeastern media, or whether it be New York City or San Francisco, it's impossible to educate them on guns because they're not legally allowed to touch a gun. So when you see them try to talk about guns and they're all ignorant, many of them remain ignorant because they want to be ignorant, but many of them, there's not even an opportunity for our team to educate them about guns because there's no legal way for them to even experience shooting a handgun at a gun range without going to jail. And I do think that ultimately that influences their reporting because they cannot even experience it. So to them, that's why they think a firearm is this animated object like the cutlery in the movie Beauty and the Beast that comes alive in the middle of the night and goes out and shoots someone. Obviously, that's absurd. Guns are not animated objects. They are tools that only can be used by good and bad people. But I do think that the lack of gun understanding is in part due to the gun laws that the left has, passed to make it impossible for people to learn about guns and use guns and enjoy guns. And I think that's part of their grand plan, by the way, to ban guns, to discourage people from getting guns, from discouraging people from learning about guns, and certainly from discouraging people from enjoying guns, because the left doesn't want that. That's why in places like New York City and San Francisco, they make it impossible for anybody really to get guns except for a few people.
Does this not really mirror the socialism argument? The left is arguing for something they just don't understand. When you look at their arguments for socialism, it's clear that they don't understand what socialism actually is. And many of them arguing against gun control have no idea what it means to be a law-abiding citizen that owns a firearm. I don't blame them other than the fact that they're too lazy to go out and find for themselves. And that's the biggest issue I have, is that we're arguing. You can't argue with the ignorance of it's the gun's fault, because when you look back on, remember the Charlottesville rally where the young man drove the car over the young lady? I didn't hear any blame on the car. I heard the blame on the driver. When you look back on some of the machete-wielding nightmares that have happened in Great Britain, I heard about the human being, not the machete. But when I heard about Parkland, I heard about the gun. And the left's desire to pick and choose their selective outrage, where they're going to be outraged and what they're going to be outraged about, gets magnified by Hollywood, who's twice as stupid as any common citizen in this country, the things that come out of their mouths. All of these people, by the way, the irony is not lost on anyone when you're talking about a group of people in Hollywood, most of them arguing for gun control, surrounded by armed guards that they pay 24/7. They don't see that, or they don't acknowledge that. They refuse to acknowledge that. Hey, listen, when you wrote the book, one last question. When you wrote the book, I'm wondering, when you started to go in the book, by the way, guys, #duped, how the anti-gun lobby exploits Parkland school shooting and how gun owners can fight back. You'll be able to find it on Amazon.com and anywhere. Good conservative documents are sold, so make sure you go to Amazon quickly because they'll find a way to try and bury it, I'm sure. Anyway, when you started the book, you had a vision of the NRA. Did your vision of the NRA change any after the book?
No, I mean, I'm a lifetime member of the NRA, and I fully support the NRA. My one public observation about the NRA is, certainly whenever there's a school shooting, I think that the media jumps out before we know any facts, right? The media that's anti-gun, as soon as there's a shooting, they're on TV in 5 minutes talking about how there's such a thing as gun violence, which is not true any more than there's airplane violence on 9/11, right? It's people violence. And the media jumps out immediately without any facts and attacks the gun. While the NRA, sits back and waits for the facts to come in and comments when the facts come in. And I am, always concerned about that lag and delay because, Mark Twain apocryphally said, and other people have said, that, a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can even get its pants on. And I do think that the left, whenever there's a shooting, it's high profile, the left goes immediately into gun control mode. And I think the NRA and many people on our pro-gun side, there's a delay and lag for us to find out the facts. And during that lag period, it often allows the lefties to capture the media narrative in a harmful way. And I think that's what happened at Parkland, where the story of gun control got out front when the reality was it wasn't gun control is not the story. The real story is government incompetence, and you better protect yourself with a gun because the cops won't be able to do it most of the time. And Parkland proved the point.
#duped. How the anti-gun lobby exploits the Parkland school shooting and how gun owners can fight back. Launch date is when, and where's your book tour start?
It just launched, Kurt. It's available on Amazon.com, so I encourage everyone to go to Amazon and read #duped and get the arguments you need to defeat the left on the gun issue.
Mark Smith, thank you, bud. Have a great one. God bless, bud.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think we've gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is writer and probably one of the busiest men at Breitbart.com, John Nolte. Good morning, John. What's going on?
Hey, good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you.
It's always a pleasure to catch up. I want to ask you a couple different things. First of all, Hollywood has gone full mental. I mean, I don't even know any other way to put it. But the fact of the matter is Hollywood has gone way over the edge if they weren't already there. The level of violence and vitriol we're seeing from Hollywood and the things that have happened, people from Maxine Waters to Lord knows who else, calling for open violence. You wrote a piece that's out yesterday on Breitbart.com. I was pointed to the video of the 30-year-old man who pulled off the hat of a teenager, Make America Great Again hat, and threw his drink in his face. It was very disturbing, and those are the kind of things that make my blood boil because I despise bullies. Anyway, you wrote an article, and in that article you were kind of recommending or recognizing 132 acts of violence by the left on the right against Trump supporters, open public violence that is, well, first of all, most of it's criminal, by the way. But this is something that the left has tried to put on the right, but they own it. They are they are Nazis. That's what, and I don't mean that in a comical way. They're doing exactly what the brown shirts did in the mid-1930s as they tried to suppress the anti-Hitler movement or the Ernst Röhm segment of the SA or the SS. This is exactly what they did. They are the very thing they scream to hate and purport to fight against. That's who they are.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that this is a project that's going to take a couple of weeks. We're only up to 132 today, so we have got emails coming in, and we've got lists coming in, and we've got incidents that we're finding. We're going to be filling out this list over the next week or two, 30, 40 incidents a day as we find them. So my guess is that by the time we're done, we're going to be close to 500 incidents of straight up violence committed by leftists against Trump supporters, or harassment, or justifying violence. Because another part of this list is going to be the media justifying violence.
Right.
But it is open season on Trump supporters, and the brown shirt comparison is perfect because that's exactly it. Only in Germany in the 20s, they identified themselves as the brown shirts. Everybody knew who they were, and now they're these Antifa terrorists, or they're just these left wingers, and they know because of our media environment, and that's why the title of the piece is Media Approved Violence, that they're going to get away with it. If any incident like this ever happened to a Democrat, if a white guy went into a restaurant and ripped an Obama hat off a black woman and then threw a drink in her face, the news media would blot out the sun with that story.
Yep.
That clip would play like the Rodney King clip. But these acts of violence, 133, and I'm telling you, this is the tip of the iceberg. Just watch this piece over the next 2 weeks. All of this stuff is media approved because the media ignores it, they downplay it, or they justify it, and we see a lot of justifying out there.
Yeah, and that's probably the saddest thing is why, in my opinion, the media has, outside of maybe Breitbart and Drudge, the media has lost all accountability. I got in significant amounts of social media trouble when I tweeted out a shirt that said rope tree journalists, some assembly required. And the point I was making was that the modern day media was committing suicide, which it is, and it has. And if you look at what Jim Acosta does on a daily basis, trying to be the story instead of write the story, and everybody else on the news, and there are many of them on Fox News as well who have betrayed us in ways that will never, ever be able to regain our trust. And like I said, you've been busy. I've read a ton of stuff, and a lot of this stuff is not kind of lighthearted journalism pieces. Much of it is very, very serious stuff, and we're talking about the open approval by liberals of violence, public violence on conservatives, and the left would have us believe. Well, I mean, listen, look at the shooting in Annapolis. It took them less than 5 minutes to begin inundating social media with the blame that President Trump was to blame for the shooting, when it turns out he had absolutely zero to do with it. Which, by the way, I don't know about you, but I generally tend to blame the person pulling the trigger 99 times out of 100 when there's a shooting, because that's pretty much, as human beings, we're all accountable for our own actions. The left would have them be where and when it suits them, as far as accountability is concerned. But I did want to mention another thing, and it's not going to get a lot of press because it's about the press. One of the other stories you did was commenting on, for the, umpteenth consecutive quarter, CNN is nosediving from a viewer's perspective, a ratings perspective. CNN is at the bottom of the heap by a long shot. Now, I'm wondering, when do they say enough? When do they either just dissolve or decide that, you know what, this really isn't working?
Well, they don't.
Or
they have to. They don't. They'll never do. They've already re-upped Jeff Zucker, who's the guy driving CNN into the ground through 2020, because they want to cover the campaign, the re-election campaign, just like they're covering stories now. And I bring up this point a lot, but it's important. CNN doesn't have to worry about ratings, because everyone who has a cable package with CNN on it hands CNN $15 a year.
Right.
Whether you watch CNN or not, $15 of your cable bill goes to CNN. And when CNN is in 80, 90 million homes, that's billions of dollars. So CNN doesn't have to worry about ratings. They can do whatever the hell they want and drive their – I mean, Jake Tapper's getting 600,000 viewers a day now.
Yeah.
I mean, they are that's about as low as you can get. Those are probably TVs that are on accidentally as someone's ironing or remodeling or something. So they don't have to worry about ratings because the cable game is so rigged. They get tens, hundreds of millions of dollars a month simply because they're on your package. So anyone out there who has cable, if you hate CNN, you have to cancel your cable package. You have to move to streaming so CNN doesn't get your money, because that's the only thing keeping them alive.
Yeah, and as soon as streaming overtakes cable, they're done.
Exactly, yeah.
And there's very much a parallel between what's happening at CNN and what's happening at ESPN, and why these companies are fighting for, kind of a regulation oversight onto the TV, to cable news and to direct TV, because if CNN can't take $15 out of a cable subscriber's bill, they have no revenue.
That's right. It's true, and it's even more so with ESPN. I think everyone who has ESPN on their cable package, again, whether you watch or not, they're making about $85 a year off of you. ESPN gets a ton of money, gets $4 or $5 per subscriber. There is no way ESPN could survive on its ratings. All these packages that ESPN bought, the baseball and the basketball and the football packages, they'd be bankrupt by now, because there's no way they could survive off of just viewers and the advertising revenue that came from those viewers. So that's why ESPN is on and even streaming packages come with ESPN. And it's the same game, just moving over to streaming packages. And if you want to kill ESPN, you got to cancel your package.
Let me ask you something. In nature, I've learned, having a farm, when you have a predator on your land and you remove the predator, nature provides that something will take its place. CNN, let's just say that streaming overtakes cable, which it's going to. CNN will go the way of the dodo. Something will be there to take its place, whether it be a different format or a different company. Is that us? I mean, I ask that for the simple fact that I know we're growing. I know by the vitriol and anger the left has at us, for us, and about us, that we're doing something right. And I'm wondering who fills that hole. Is it CRTV? Is it us? Is it a combination of people or programs? Or what format does it look like to you? And who may it be that ends up taking CNN's void that they leave when they do end up with 120,000 viewers a month and are absolutely not relevant?
What's going to happen is that everything's going to move online. You're going to be watching all your television online, even if it is a cable package that you're streaming now, because there's a lot of those out there. But everything's going to move online, and and there's no longer going to be channels. You're just going to have a streaming portal or an app. And like the NRA has their own TV network now, and you can watch the NRA TV for free through an app on Roku. And that's how it's going to be. And the media environment is going to be even more fractured than it is now. And hopefully what we're going to see is that once, the MSNBCs and the CNNs kind of go away, the politicians are going to pay just as much attention to an NRA TV as they would to a CNN, because I think people are still so enamored with the idea of being on television that they forget that nobody really watches television, but there's still the prestige of being on CNN, even though no one's watching you. And once that goes away, you're going to see politicians and newsmakers going to different places, and that's going to knock a lot of the prestige out of it. Because CNN right now and MSNBC right now, they don't make any ripples in the narrative through reporting. They're not breaking stories that shock the world. What they're doing is they're trolling the president. That's what Jim Acosta does. If CNN gets attention or an MSNBC gets attention, it's because they've done something so outrageous against Trump that's what makes news, or they've been so obnoxious. So that is going to tire out eventually. And the other problem is that anybody can do that. Right. So I think once everything is based online and you're clicking apps instead of flipping through cable channels, it's just going to be a much more fractured media environment. And hopefully in that environment, you're going to have to actually come up with a story, come up with a piece of news to get attention, as opposed to just being an asshole like Jim Acosta.
Right. Well, and I got to tell you, the one thing I've recognized, I said this about 15 years ago when I opened 38 Studios, was that online content, gaming, was going to go fully digital. It was going to make the Blockbusters and the GameStops pretty much obsolete places, and that's started to happen. When I left ESPN, I said the same thing. You and we get to choose where, when, and how we're entertained these days. The only thing that requires timing, and even that is not true because you can tape an event, but the only thing that requires your immediate attention is a live sporting event. You can tape it, not watch it, and watch it later. But the fact of the matter is, we get to pick where we're entertained, how we're entertained, and what entertains us. I like the fact that that's a capitalism at its best, right? That's free markets. You're going to have to create content that's entertaining as opposed to just being the person occupying the space. And that, to me, is going to spell a death knell to the liberal media as we know it. Because, listen, they told us the last election she had a 95% chance of winning. These are the same people who are living in a reality that has nothing to do with actually what's happening in the real world, the things that they say and do. They're going to get called on it. They're being called on it. And it's going to end up being a situation where they're going to go away. And their relevance is going to be meaningless, and people will fill that vacuum. Everybody with an iPhone is a potential court reporter right now, and that's a dangerous thing to the companies like CNN who try and push a false narrative that can be disproven with one click of the mouse.
That really, when I'm going through this list of assaults and harassment of Trump supporters by the left, that's one of the things that I'm finding more than anything is that so many of these incidents were picked up by iPhones. The media was nowhere nearby. Right. And if people didn't have iPhones, if they weren't able to record it on the spot, we wouldn't even know about it because the media would be able to cover it up. They wouldn't have to just by not reporting it. But they can't stop a citizen activist from putting it on YouTube or putting it on Twitter, putting photographic proof of it on Twitter and YouTube. And I did a rap sheet of all the Occupy Wall Street sins back when that was going on, I think in 2010. And I'm comparing it to this rap sheet of the left sins against Trump supporters, and it's just remarkable the difference just over the 8 years of how much of this stuff has been caught by people with their own video cameras. And you have to wonder how many. I think Occupy Wall Street was up to like 500 things they had done. It probably would have been 5 times that had there been as many iPhones back then as there are now. So yeah, that's a very big deal. And you can see the media is still suppressing it though. All these acts of violence, sometimes 10 in a month, and there's no story. There's no national story about it. There's no narrative about it. So they're still able to suppress it, but not like they were able to. And now we're all talking to one another. You know, we're not going to CNN to get the news. We're getting our news from each other. We're getting it from Twitter and Facebook and our family and talk radio and Breitbart News. So we all know what's going on, even if the media refuses to give it the coverage they would if this was happening to even one Democrat.
Hey, John, listen, I said it before. I'm going to say it again. I know I can tell by your content how busy you are, but this stuff is powerful. Keep going. I actually tweeted out a link to your article, too, telling people to send in their contributions if they're not already on the list. So I'm going to imagine this list is going to grow crazy grow.
Yeah,
anyway.
That's exactly. It's going to crazy grow. I cannot believe what I'm seeing out there. People should keep an eye on it, and I appreciate you promoting it.
Always a pleasure, John.
All right, have a good weekend, my friend.
Take care, buddy. All right, winners and losers, guys. Very easy today. You heard the soundbite earlier from President Trump's rally. He wins again. That was some good stuff, funny stuff. Feels like he's kind of hitting his stride. He's never going to be a great public speaker, but my God, the stuff coming out of his mouth is absolutely hilarious. And the loser is somebody he mentioned. Elizabeth Warren trying to draw some sort of parallel between her DNA test and the DNA test being given to children at the border so they can be matched up with their parents instead of drug smugglers. She is, I've said it before, I'll say it again, she is everything you hate and we hate as a country about politics. Jeff Deal, D-I-E-H-L, is running against her, and I believe is finally going to unseat her and get her out of government. She is the epitome of a swamp dweller and needs to be gone. Anyway, thank you guys. Thanks to Mark Smith. Thanks to John Nolte. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. And when we talk again, we will be getting ready to hear the President of the United States' next Supreme Court nominee. And that is going to be a 4th of July present 5 days late. God bless. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, guys.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
A lot of people not knowing what action they could or should take to make the difference. What I do is try to turn people on to sites like Breitbart, people who are writing and publishing the truth so that people will get educated. But, you kind of can't blame productive members of society who are kind of confused, perplexed as to what do we do to take this government back.
Sirius XM Patriot Channel 125.